County Commissioners now back in session. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Allen Pierce at this time.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, commissioners. So this is an afternoon session of the Board of County Commissioners. It's scheduled to talk about the Triumph funding opportunities that we have available to us. We have Mr. Scott Remington here in the front row, who's going to make a presentation in more detail than I'm going to give right this minute, but I'm going to do a brief overview. Mr. Remington, as you see from the PowerPoint there, is the General Counsel to the Triumph Board, so he has a better handle than I do on the process. The process is somewhat fluid. The Triumph has just got themselves organized just as about 8 months ago. Two new board members came on. Mr. Jason Shope is here. He's one of the new board members, leading Mr. Remington. And so we are learning what Triumph is today, and we will be learning in the future. What prompted this meeting is the Triumph Board announced that they were ready to accept pre-applications to projects, and they wanted everybody to do a pre-application to save everybody some trouble in the long run, so that we had an idea, we the applicants had an idea of what was expected out of Triumph, and Triumph had an idea of what was coming, and if someone was way off course, rather than go through a full application only to find your way off course, the Triumph Board suggested a mandatory pre-application so that everybody would be either guided to be back on course or dismissed early on without spending a lot of effort. So the purpose of today's meeting partly is to hear from Mr. Remington about the process that Triumph has in place as of now, and it will be, I'm sure, amended as time goes on, because they're also in the learning curve about how to deal with applications, as well as to deal with the first opportunity for Franklin County and projects in Franklin County to be sent to Triumph. This is the first round. This is not the only round. This is certainly not the last round. I spoke to Ms. Susan Skelton this morning, and Scott may say more about this throughout his presentation. There was a deadline of November 15th for this first round of pre-application. Admittedly, people thought that meant that was the only pre-application process, but it's not the only pre-application process. This is the first one. There's $15 million reserved for each of the 8 counties in the Panhandle. We're one of those 8 counties. So our $15 million is there when we get good projects that are soundly vetted, that are supported by the community. When we get to that point, we can apply. If we're here today, we'll start today. If we want to take more time with some projects, we have that time, because that money is reserved for projects in Franklin County. The only sort of risk of that, I will say, and say Scott may want to add to it or alter it slightly, is that of the $300 million that Triumph has in its hands right now, 40% of that is allocated to the county. So $120 million allocated, $15 million per county. The other $160 million is not allocated, and it is competitive. And so I say this to Scott, that we feel that we are under a little bit of pressure, because we don't want to be the last one in line when we have more than $15 million for the projects, and all of a sudden everybody else is ahead of us, and that other $160 million has been allocated before we get there. So, I mean, I know we're all learning together, but I just say that's part of the risk. We all want to see more than $15 million in each of our counties. And so we want to work expeditiously to get projects to Triumph Board so they have time to review our projects and give us due consideration, maybe give us more guidance on what we need to do, and work through this. Because we have $15 million, we would love to double that to $30 million. We would love to get a bigger share of money, but that other share is not allocated to us, and we have to show good projects that the Triumph Board supports, and that they will then allocate some of that unallocated money to Franklin County. And that's the challenge that I sort of say we have in front of us today. What I just handed out, and I just decided to hand out so everybody has something to hold on to, is a very crude summary of what came in as of last night at 4:30. So we're going to get presentations later on, but I just want to tell you what you have in your hand so you don't get confused. What you have in your hand is a very short list of the projects that came in by 4:30. You have two. The top, that's the Armory that the county owns. We're looking for, what I show there is the amount of money sought for out of Triumph, and then what kind of match there is. Very short presentation, or very short analysis of what's there. So what I want to add, though, so no one thinks being left out, the school board has 2 projects. So if you want to keep track of everything that is in the county hand at this time, the 2 additional projects you need to write in at the bottom there for the school board is a workforce housing and vocational training project. Because it's not going to be on your screen, we just got it here. So a workforce housing and vocational training project for $2 million of Triumph funds. And then a STEM or a STEAM project, which is science, technology, engineering, and I put the A thing, mathematics, educational project for $1.8 million. So if you add those two projects to the total that we now have $21.5 million of pre-applications for you all to look at. Pre-applications coming out of Franklin County. There is one additional application that I also did list here, and that's for Pump Out USA, and they want $39 million for their project alone, which is a regional project generating, well, for all 8 counties, that would do something to alleviate and eliminate marine sewage spills and effluent and holding tanks around the Gulf Coast. I didn't list that because from their brief presentation, and I do have it on your screen, it's not clear that they need, how much money they're expecting each county to come up with. But they want $39 million of Triumph funds overall. And the gentlemen who are on the bigger level than we are, you probably already heard about this opportunity or this program. Because apparently they sent this request to every 8 county, wanting each county to submit a letter of support. I'm fearful of doing that because I don't want Triumph to misunderstand. Even if we like the project, I don't want the Triumph to think that, okay, that means $39 million comes off the top, and that's Franklin County. So, it's a project submitted to us, and we didn't ask for it. It's regional, and I'm not going to talk about it today unless there's interest from the community. So something we'll have to deal with at a later date. So what you have for you is basically the title of the project, the amount of money that Triumph has been requested, what kind of in-kind, what kind of match there is. And at this point, I'm going to stop, Mr. Chairman, unless you have specific questions. And then I'm going to let Mr. Remington do it, and then we can talk about you want to hear from the applicants next, and how we want to proceed.
Okay. On the 2 applications that are not on our iPad, yes, from the school,
yes,
can you get the commissioner a copy of that?
Yes, she has it. She has it to hand out.
Well, I'd rather go ahead and get it so that I can start reviewing some of this stuff, and I know the other commissioners want to see it too before it actually comes up.
Sure.
Which was the reason I had you put these other applications on our iPad, but we have time last night to look over some of this stuff. So we're going to get these 2 applications, commissioners, that we've not seen yet.
Right.
We got the total dollar amounts, and Alex explained it, but I want to see the devil's in the details. I want to see the details. Okay. And then we'll proceed with Mr. Remington.
Yes, so this is Scott Remington. He and his firm represent the Triumph Board directly. And Scott, I'll defer. You can stand there with the microphone. We can have you sit down here with the microphone. You however you want to do it.
No problem. Whatever's easiest for the commissioners.
The mic has a port picked up, Scott. You'll have to get a little bit closer.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can now.
Please let me know if you can't hear me or anybody in the back. I'm happy to speak up, try to speak more loudly. First of all, thank you for inviting us to come present to you today. On behalf of Speaker Alan Bentz, Chairman of the Triumph Board, Jason Schoaf, and all the rest of the board members, we want to extend our gratitude for having the opportunity to come be a part of this workshop, and really thank you for being so engaged in this process. It is critically important to the success of Triumph long term to have citizens and government entities that are engaged and involved, and we appreciate everything that you do to make this process work for the entire region. I was asked this morning, or this afternoon rather, to give a brief summary kind of where Triumph has been, where it's going, and answer any questions that you can have. So I've got a slideshow I'm going to try to go through pretty quickly. I think it's important whenever we talk about Triumph to remember why Triumph exists. And the reason that we have Triumph and this $1.5 billion opportunity is because of the tragedy that took place in 2010, and that was the explosion of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And as somebody who was born and raised on the Gulf Coast, I have the same affinity for our natural resources that all of you do. And I can remember, as you can, during the 87 days that the well was uncapped, watching this on TV every night, and it seemed like it was ever present in the bottom of our television screens, and we didn't know when it was going to end. And that created a great deal of anxiety along the Gulf Coast. It created a great deal of anxiety among people outside of the Gulf Coast who would come here to visit. We were severely damaged economically by the tourists who didn't come down to Apalachicola or Pensacola and enjoy oysters or seafood. And at the time this was going on, we were all anxious, and that anxiety was a result of the oil that started to wash up. This is a shot of Pensacola Beach near my home, where the oil and the tar balls began to wash up within the months after the spill, while the oil was continuing to spew into the Gulf. And that anxiety led us all to fear the worst, that everything we loved about our environment and our way of life, our seafood, our beaches, tourism, all of that could be gone if this wasn't fixed and remediated. It also showed us just how fragile our economy was, based primarily on tourism, the seafood industry, and the military here in Northwest Florida. And that if any leg of that three-legged stool were to fail, we would be in real dire financial straits. So, as you know, and I believe Mr. Parrish, you're the Restore Coordinator, shortly after the oil spill happened, Restore came into being, and federal money began to flow in. And that was a result of criminal penalties against BP and the other bad actors in the spill, monies that were appropriated from the federal government at different levels, and they created very complex webs of how that money would be distributed, what it could be spent on, and it was all primarily designed for projects that were going to enhance or remediate the environmental damage that occurred as a result of the spill. What these restore projects and the criminal penalties don't really assess is how do we fix the economic problems that we sustain going forward. So shortly after the spill, Attorney General Pam Bondi filed a lawsuit against BP as part of the class action lawsuit, and one of the elements of damages that she maintained were sustained by the state were economic damages. That was financial damages that the state lost, tax revenue, sales tax, bed tax, all of the things that we should have realized but lost as a result of the spill. And they didn't quantify those numbers, but we knew that claim for economic damages existed and was out there. And the Attorney General hired a law firm, a team of lawyers actually, and they began pursuing those claims in addition to natural resource claims. At the time, Northwest Florida was fortunate to have one of our own in a leadership position in Tallahassee, and that was Don Gates. Don Gates passed in 2013 what is formerly known as the Gulf Coast Economic Corridor Act, or the Triumph Act, as we call it. And what that bill said was that in the event that Attorney General Bondi was successful in recovering any economic damages, that those damages would be divided between the 8 counties in the Panhandle that were most disproportionately affected by the spill and the rest of the state. So the natural resources damages to habitat, those damages went into a separate pot. But any monies that were collected just for the purpose of the economic damages we sustained, we were going to divide those between the 8 counties and the rest of the state. And the division that the legislature agreed on was 75% of the money would go to the 8 counties, which includes Franklin, and 25% would go to the rest of the state. That legislation went through, and at the time, I don't know that anybody realized that ultimately the settlement would come in at $2 billion for economic damages. So from that $2 billion number, 75% of those funds, or $1.5 billion, and that's the area highlighted in green on this slide, is set aside for that 8-county area stretching from Escambia County to Wakulla County. I like to say, when people ask me, what is the Triumph region? Was that part of the map that used to get cut off on your road atlas, if you remember? When you saw a map of Florida and we weren't on it, well, that's the part. We were left off all those maps, but this made sure that we wouldn't get left off from the recovery settlement. Now, the legislature did put some rules on these, and these rules changed in the last legislative session. So I'm going to kind of give you kind of a sense of, number one, what the legislature has said are their priorities for how this money should be spent. And then the second category is the specific awards that the legislature has authorized. I think everyone agrees that it's important for us to follow the legislature's guidance because this money coming to us in the future is dependent on future legislative action. The legislature has to continue to appropriate the money, and it was a law that made Triumph, and a law can take Triumph away. So if we're not good stewards of this money, the legislature can come and change the law and take that money and put it back into the state's general operating fund. So these are the priorities that the legislature has currently identified as important to it. It believes that we need projects that generate maximum estimated economic benefits based on tools and models not generally employed by economic output analyses. The legislature wants projects that are going to increase household income in the disproportionately affected counties above the national average. The legislature would like to see us leverage or further enhance key regional assets, including educational institutions, research facilities, and military bases. Partner with local governments to provide funds, infrastructure, land, or other assistance for projects. Benefit the environment in addition to the economy. Projects should show outcome measures. They're looking for projects that partner with K-20 educational institutions or school districts located within the counties. They are looking for projects that are recommended by the Board of County Commissioners of the county in which the project or program will be located. That language is so important because that's the legislative guidance, and that's where your role comes in. One of the priorities is to fund projects that are recommended by the county commission. And finally, partner with visitor bureaus, convention centers, and other tourist development agencies. So what types of awards are eligible? Certainly there are any number of things that can accomplish those goals in different ways. At a separate part of the statute, the legislature has told us what we can and cannot use this money for. And I'm going to combine here some things. The list of eligible awards changed materially from 2013 to 2017. In the original legislation, an eligible award would be for ad valorem tax reduction. However, the legislature has signaled that that should be restricted, and they don't intend for that to be ad valorem tax reduction for a single business. The legislature does not like projects that pick winners and losers. So they're looking for ad valorem tax reduction for a class or group or spread across a bigger segment of the population. Impact fees cannot be paid with Triumph funds. That was something specifically listed in 2013. It was removed last year. Local match requirements for rural county development. That's part of the Rural County Economic Development Statute. There are provisions that allow rural counties, Franklin County being one of them, to access funds from the Department of Economic Opportunity to help with planning, engineering, sort of preparing projects to apply for funding, and Triumph money can be used for that purpose. The general category of economic development has been deleted. So again, that falls into the legislative prohibition or dislike of picking winners and losers and providing direct subsistence, direct money subsidies to companies, individual companies. Infrastructure projects are authorized, but not for specific employers. Disaster response and recovery projects are funded, as well as K-20 education programs that prepare students for careers in healthcare and science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And the legislature has included tourism funding and freshman Florida dollars. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's a list of what the legislature has identified that it believes would be eligible awards. Some of the other changes that happened in 2017 language was added that the legislature believes that programs that provide participants in the affected counties with transferable, sustainable workforce skills, not confined to a single employer, are advantageous. They also added the language that Mr. Parrish referred to earlier, that each county commission will provide input on a minimum distribution of at least 5% of the initial $300 million allocation to Triumph, and thereafter 4%. So if we think about it, what happens is the payments of $1.5 billion was not paid in one check, it's paid over time. So for Triumph's perspective, we received our first payment from Triumph in 2016, $400 million. 25% or $100 million went to the state of Florida, $300 million, 75% came to Triumph. Of that $300 million, each of the 8 counties are guaranteed 5% allocation to be spent at that county's discretion. The county doesn't get to pick the project, but it has to be a project that you have input on, and that results in $15 million minimum for each county. They also appointed 2 additional board members, ensuring that there was someone from at least 2 populous counties involved in the mix. and the money was formally appropriated by the legislature to Triumph. Remember, but as the legislature giveth, the legislature can take it away. The key difference in the legislature was the allocation to each county of at least 5% or $15 million. And there's been a lot of questions and a lot of concerns about exactly what that means. What we believe from looking at the statutes and the language I showed you earlier, it means that $15 million will be spent in your county. The projects will be selected by the Triumph Board, but one of the priorities is to select projects that are recommended by the County Commission. There is no language that requires or asks you to prioritize or rank projects. It simply says whether or not you recommend the project or not. That said, the Triumph Board has indicated that they do and would like for the county commissions to rank the projects so they know what's most important to you, because they believe you have the best local knowledge of what's important in your counties. This is, I think, the language ensuring that $15 million goes to each county. If you look at county's population and annual budget, this is a huge benefit to Franklin County, a big win for you in the legislature. Not to mention the fact that you have a residual guarantee percentage of the next $1.2 million that will come through the pipe. And that money will come to us roughly $80 million a year, starting in 2019 to 2033. So think long. All these decisions aren't going to be made in the next month or the next year or the next 5 years. We have a long way to go and a lot of opportunities to use this money. The Board of Directors, if you don't know who they are, Jason Shoaf, who's here today from Gulf County, Don Gates, former Senate President, lives in Walton County. Steve Riggs is an Okaloosa County resident. He's a CPA in Destin. Pam Dana is also an Okaloosa County resident who owns a charter boat business and works with the Institute for Human and Machine Cognition in Pensacola. Dr. Dana, she's a PhD, was also one of Jeb Bush's economic advisors, so she has a lot of history in economic development in the area. Stan Conley, who's the president and CEO of Gulf Power, is on the board, as are Bob Benezzi, an Okaloosa County resident who's a successful businessman, and former Speaker of the House, Alan Benz, who is our current chairman. He will give the gavel to Senator Don Gates in January when he assumes the chairmanship this time. In addition to the legislative priorities that we talked about earlier, the Triumph bill, the Gulf Coast Economic Corridor Act, also gives the board the discretion to set its own priorities. Much like county commissioners are seen as the people closest to their populace and know what projects should be priorities, the legislature said the Triumph Board should also set discretionary priorities for projects to come to it. And the board has published a set of discretionary priorities. One of the keys, and a term you'll hear a lot, is the board is looking for projects that are transformational for the future of Northwest Florida. And everybody probably has a different idea of what transformational means, but I think if you look at the intent of Triumph, is to try to find ways to transform our economy so we're not so dependent on just those three legs of our economic stool. They're looking for projects that can be consummated quickly and efficiently, projects that promote net new jobs in the private sector, aligned with Northwest Florida's Ford proposal, and that's part of Florida's Great Northwest. If you're familiar with that organization.
We're not a member, but we are familiar.
Okay. Then you should, on their website, Florida's Great Northwest has published kind of the results of a multi-year study on what they believe the most effective economic development methods and tools will be for our region. And that's one of the priorities the board has identified, is looking at that plan for some support and assistance. The board wants to find net new jobs in targeted industries. And the targeted industries they've identified are aerospace and defense, financial services, water transportation, and artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, information technology, manufacturing, and robotics. They're looking for projects that promote industry clusters and impacts for unique targeted industries. They're looking at the new jobs be above the national average wage. They're looking for projects located in a rural area of opportunity that is defined by the state of Florida, which Franklin County is.
Is all 8 counties?
No. 3 counties are located in rural areas of economic opportunity. I believe it's Franklin County, Wakulla County, and Gulf County. Walton may be included, but I'm not positive. I'd have to check that out. I'm sorry.
I was thinking maybe that was a catch-all. Everybody was in it, so it didn't really matter, but apparently it does matter.
They're looking for projects that provide a regional impact, not simply a local impact. And they're looking for projects that align with similar programs across the region to try to leverage as much as we can the efforts and the things that have been done in the community. They'd like to enhance research and innovative technologies in the region, enhance targeted industry clusters to create a center of excellence in Northwest Florida, create unique assets that can be leveraged for regional growth of targeted industries. And when we talk about leverage, that's a very important consideration for Triumph. They're looking for projects that will have funding sources beyond just Triumph. If projects, I would suspect projects that come to the board seeking 100% financing will have trouble. Because what Triumph's goal is, what the members have said, is they want to leverage other monies as best possible. That includes private money, it includes other state money, it includes federal money. And our goal is to try to turn that $1.5 billion into $5, 10, or $20 billion of actual economic impact on the region. They're looking for local investment and spending, so growing from within and not just simply trying to bring people from the outside without a track record. They're looking for projects that are supported by more than one governmental entity or private sector company. And I would say this is a particularly important consideration for you to consider. Alan made a comment which is not necessarily incorrect, and that is, we have our guaranteed portion, then we got to compete for the rest of it. Really, I've heard some counties say we got to go fight for our Triumph dollars. I think you'll see a Triumph board that's going to be more friendly towards counties that come together than counties that are trying to get just for themselves. It goes back to the regional participation. So engaging with your other regional partners, your other cities, towns, but in particular other counties, state agencies, those are all going to be things where you can leverage other assets and be very attractive to Triumph. They would like clear performance metrics so they can measure and report back to the legislature how successful they've been in creating economic enhancement and diversification. They'd like to provide capacity for building support for additional regional economic growth. They are looking at environmentally conscious projects, and I think they would like to use as much local talent as we can. So looking locally, if we can use local assets and resources to get these projects going, they want to reward the people who've been here and have been working so far. Triumph timeline, just simply, July of 2017 is when Triumph was first organized. So it wasn't that long ago that Triumph finally got the money from the legislature, and they needed the money from the legislature to file their paperwork to formally organize. They had met unofficially for several years, but the first official meeting for Triumph was July of 17, and they hit the ground running. They immediately appointed subcommittees such that in August they were able to retain accounting firms, legal firms to help with those needs. They hired an administrative executive director, Ms. Susan Skelton, and they have continued to work on the application and scoring criteria for the proposals that come in. The September meeting was canceled as a result of Hurricane Irma, but the subcommittees continued to meet. The Triumph Board last met in October. At that time, they had approved a pre-application process, and this is a mandatory pre-application process. Mr. Parrish talked about it earlier. It's a 2 to 3 page summary of what your proposal is, and there are a couple goals to that. As Stan Connolly said at one of our meetings, is he hopes that we'll be able to play matchmaker to some extent. And so if we see a project that comes in from Franklin County that mirrors or is very close to something that came in Wakulla or Gulf County, we might put those counties together and see how we can work together to make the most out of what we have. So that's one reason for the pre-application process. Another reason is to make sure that no county or no person spends a whole lot of time and effort and energy going down a rabbit trail that's not going to bear fruit at the end. So we want people to know early on if their projects fit the criteria, are eligible under the statutes, and how they can work together regionally to get the most bang for the buck. We're in the process now of selecting an economic advisor and a scoring entity, and November 15th was set as the deadline for the first pre-applications. When we say deadline, it's really kind of a misnomer. I'm like maybe some of you are like me. I operate off of deadlines, and part of publishing a deadline was to make sure everybody was working and moving towards getting something in. However, all this money is not going to be given away at one time. As we said, it's coming in $80 million a year from 2019 to 2033. So we've got a long way to go, but we can't get there until we take the first step. So really that November 15 date is a consideration deadline. If you have an application that is ready to go, a project that meets the criteria and you think is dynamite and a no-brainer for Triumph, the first time they could consider funding that would be at their December meeting. Well, they can't consider a pre-app unless they have some time to look at it. You know, they want it on their iPad just like you'd like it on theirs. So November 15th, in order for them to get it on their iPads or in their inboxes, we're asking for anything that would be considered at the December meeting to be in November 15th. That doesn't mean any decision will be made, although decisions could be made. The Triumph Board has a great deal of flexibility, but this has been a way to jumpstart the process and make sure that everybody is thinking about how we get in the queue and how we get our projects presented to Triumph. I expect in November, tomorrow at our Triumph meeting, we will continue to review the pre-application and application process. I hope that tomorrow we'll be able to publish the formal application online, if it hasn't been published already. We thought we might have some pre-applications to talk about, but as I understand it now, only one has been filed, so there probably won't be much done with pre-applications tomorrow. Hopefully we'll be in a position to select an economic advisor or move that ball further down the field. Then, like any board, we're sunshine, and we've noticed our meetings to the public. The next meeting we have is December. That is conceivably the first time that the Triumph Board could act on any application or pre-application in front of it. However, it's probably not very likely. We will report to the Florida Legislature on the pre-applications or applications that have been filed and what we have done so far. But I would caution you that this group didn't get started until July and really lost a month due to the hurricanes. They've done a tremendous amount of work in less than 6 months. And I think that they're really going to be in a position to turn it loose come next year. So I believe that in January and February of next year, that's when you'll start seeing some final decisions on applications. Along those lines, the board has said, you know, we're not looking to spend all this money in our first meeting or our first year. I expect the board will take projects, select some, and this is just a guess. I'm not on the board. I don't have decision-making authority. My guess is they're going to run some projects through the system and see how they work. See what they've done correctly and incorrectly, and try to fix the system and go from there. Because this is a long-term play. It's not a fast or easy process. What does that mean? That means that if you submit an application or pre-application now, the fact that it's not funded doesn't mean that it will never be funded. It just simply means it's not funded now. And so as a board, if you choose to prioritize your projects to Triumph, that's a list that you may continually update. As new projects or proposals or opportunities present themselves, you may take your list of priorities and move them around. Move some to the top of the list. Take some off the list if they get funding. But that's something, it'll be an organic, living document that you'll have an opportunity to review every month, every week, as often as you like, for as long as Triumph has money. The 2018 legislation, what we like to tell people is no man's life, liberty, or property are safe when the legislature's in session. So there's no telling what could happen in Tallahassee starting in January with the session. However, we need to be diligent in not only the projects we propose, but supporting our legislators who have done so much to make this happen and to continue to ensure that we get our appropriation. So these are the guys that, or at least 3 of the 4 of them, are running the Florida legislature right now. But our representatives are the ones that we need to remind constantly that this money belongs to Northwest Florida, not the citizens in general and not the legislature. So what's the best way to do that? I think every time you see your elected officials from our region, you need to thank them for standing up for Triumph, and you need to encourage them to be steadfast in their abilities and their willingness to make sure that we continue to receive this money, not only keep what we have, but continue to get that $80 million appropriation into the future. These are your House representatives from the Triumph District. These are your state senators from the Triumph District. Any opportunity you have to tell them and thank them for their service, please do. And another person is Congressman Matt Gaetz. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that at almost every opportunity, Senator Don Gaetz tells us that we need to keep a lot of pressure on this gentleman because he's in Washington, D.C., and to the extent that he can help us leverage Triumph into federal dollars and federal infrastructure money, then that can only magnify the impact that we can have with these dollars. So I would encourage you as well to stay on your federal elected representatives to make sure that they are fully engaged and aware of what's going on with Triumph. Additional resources can be found at myfloridatriumph.com. Everything is sunshine. All our meeting minutes, agendas, presentations are all online. And I'm happy to take any questions or answers or just listen.
I guess I'll open it up for us here. One question real quick is the Triumph meetings that I've attended, they want to expend the dollars in the right way, the most prudent way, but they also want to do it, in my interpretation, is kind of quick to show the legislature. And I know they have to make these semi-annual reports to the legislature on all these projects that will be funded, how they're progressing. And in turn, the applicant has to provide them with a quarterly report of what's happening with these different projects so that they can in turn then submit these semi-annual project reports to the Speaker of the House, Senate President, and the Governor. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And what I've also understood is that they want to, I won't say spend the money expeditiously, but they want to show that they know how to spend the money across these 8 counties in the right way. Thereby, the next round of funding that comes to the legislature, there won't be no question that they go to the Triumph Fund. As you said, things can change in the legislature. My question to you is, when is the next round of funding after this initial $300 million? Will it be in 18?
No, sir, it'll be 2019.
2019. So they've got a whole year to prove themselves before there's ever any more money coming.
That is correct.
So this year will be a little bit slower. What you have to remind yourself is that from this year forward, starting in 2019, it won't be $300 million. It's going to be $80 million up until year 2033, as you just said. So my point being is the major funding is this year. It's $300 million. Now, I know there's more coming in 2019 and forward, but $300 million is a lot of money.
I agree with you, but let me tell you two things I'd add to that. Number one, there's not a requirement that all $300 million be spent before the next allocation comes. I think that what you'll see is a lot of those dollars will be allocated or could be committed to projects, but the funding may be contingent on meeting performance metrics. So, for instance, you may fund an infrastructure project that says the Triumph dollars will be the last dollars in. So once you exhaust your federal monies, once you exhaust your state monies, once you exhaust your local monies, then Triumph will add some additional money at the end. Well, they may commit to that project in 2018, but it may not be funded until 2022. That's an extreme example.
Okay.
But I think that what the board has said, I think is a fair characterization, is that some members of the board have said, we want the legislature to see that we can be successful. So we want to hit some singles and some doubles and show them that we're working the right way. At the same time, they're saying, we want to make sure our process, this is a brand new process. We want to make sure our process is working effectively. So I expect them, even though all the infrastructure for Triumph will be in place and ready to go in January, but I would be surprised, like I said, if all $300 million is spent, in the first 3 months. I think there is a sense on the Triumph board that, we want to, and again, this is not me, but I would think that the board would want to hold some money back for opportunities that may arise. You know, something could happen, just like the oil spill that can come along and transform everything you're thinking about economic development in the future of your region. If we had a major storm, or if we have any other unfortunate incident, they want to be able to take advantage of it. If we have a tremendous opportunity for some economic development or growth, diversification, they want to have the flexibility to do that. So I think what you're going to see is a real deliberate evaluation of these projects and programs, and they're going to start with selecting the best of the best and try to move those forward. And then as the process goes forward and they get more comfortable with things, you'll see more and more projects get approved and get funding. But I will say, in my experience, in talking to some board members, one priority I think you'll see is that these Triumph dollars aren't going to be 100% and are going to require some match money up front. So these dollars will be committed, but not necessarily spent until those performance metrics are met.
Okay, another question is, say you have an application, but you have a co-applicant, which is a Franklin County entity, elected governor, not governing body, but elected body, such as school board, the city, or if you have co-applicants and get to this clawback measure that if you submit an application and you're funded, but you don't sustain it and do the things you're supposed to be, there's a clawback measure, correct?
Correct.
Who would be responsible for that in a co-applicant application?
You know, Chairman Parrish, you're really getting into what I think the board is going to put on to my shoulders.
Absolutely, that's what I'm
And that is to draft agreements. Any award will have a contract or an agreement with those metrics in it, and that will have to explain how the money, you know, what the conditions of the clawback are and where it will be clawed back from. So
that would be done at the application process. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. The way that I believe that we'll see this work is applications will be made. We'll have a program administrator who will put those applications together. We'll have the input from an economist who will look at each project and give the Triumph Board counsel and advice on what they think the realistic economic benefits of the project would be. The Triumph Board will look at their priorities and select projects that meet those priorities, meet the legislative priorities, are compliant with the law, and they will say, we want project X to go forward. And if that project was one that was proposed by, you know, Franklin County, the City of Apalachicola, and Gulf State Community College, then all three of those entities in the Triumph Board would enter into a contract that said, you've applied for an award, we've agreed to fund the award under these conditions. And you agree, and who that you is, either you county, you know, college, or you city, agree that if you don't meet your metrics, that you're either not going to get the funding in the future, or that we can claw back money that we've given to you.
Okay. And another question is, I understand there's meetings I've attended that they want to take this $300 million and leverage as much money as they can so that you have the most economic impact from the project selection process and the amount of money, whether that's state grants, whether that's local dollars, or a number of different things. But we were also told that you cannot take Triumph dollars and replace money that was already allocated to you, say through FDOT. You can't replace that money if you've already been allocated, like a 5-year work plan. You got money coming to the county to pave a road 5 years from now. You cannot take Triumph dollars and do that project now because you've already been approved through the state agency to receive that fund. So that's not eligible as far as Triumph funds go. That's what I was told.
I think I understand your question, but let me turn it around and say that from a policy perspective, Triumph funds should not replace monies that are coming to the county already from DOT, DEP, or any other entity. They are not meant to replace or supplant what you should ordinarily get from the state of Florida. This is land use. This is a little something extra to recognize the fact that we were disproportionately affected in these counties. Now that said, I've heard people suggest, well, you know, we've got a DOT project that we can't get through. We've tried and we can't get approval. What if we sweeten the pot for DOT and said, we'll agree, if you'll agree to go ahead and bump our project to the top of the list, we'll get some Triumph money to supplement it. Could that work? Potentially. There's nothing in the statute that says it wouldn't work, but would you be able to say, you know what, we've got, we're supposed to build a new school in 2 years, and we were going to have to take that out of our ad valorem taxes, the school board's portion of our ad valorem taxes to build that school. We want Triumph to build the school, and then we'll use our ad valorem taxes for something else. I think you'd probably see a board reticent to get into that type of arrangement because they said, you've already planned for that. That money's supposed to come from somewhere else.
That was my, it was not so much a question for me, it was a question for the public knowledge from the Triumph Board attorney to make sure that I'm understanding correctly and that the public is understanding correctly. You got one question? Go ahead, please, Bob.
Sir, you said that on the training for people who train, and they go out and get a job, they'll want them to excel, and they get paid more than what the average skill is. I guess my question would be, do y'all got a scale on what you're expecting, or at the end, do y'all got a company gonna hire them where if they don't go to work for themselves, what y'all gonna do? If the company gonna hire them and they got to be paid more than what you're saying. Y'all looking for them to make more.
Yes, sir. I think that's an excellent question. That's a question that Stan Conley brought up at the last board meeting is, how do we measure that? How do we show that? And I think the goal would be, last week when I was in McCullough County, they talked about some getting people, young people into the trades, into vocational education school programs where they could learn HVAC and they could learn different skills. Those skills paid more than the jobs that existed in the county before. So when anyone who's putting in a vocational educational grant award request should work with an economist or work with someone to show how these occupations that we're training people for are going to create a higher wage than what the average may be in Franklin County. It may not be an accurate measure to say the national average wage or the national household income. It may be higher or lower in Franklin County. And so if you really want to transform your region, you need to have a good grasp on what your baseline economic numbers are and how your project could potentially impact those numbers.
So will y'all go along with what we pick as a baseline? I mean, when y'all, with the transfer go along, you said that they're going to make the decision, so they got numbers we got to go by so we can meet that priority.
I think the best way to answer that is maybe. The Triumph Board is hiring an economic advisor to help counsel them because they don't know what the national household income is or how it is reflected in this region and what the difference is between Franklin and Gulf County. So they're looking to find somebody who's an expert who can come in and tell them what the average wage is throughout the counties, what the average household income is, and how projects that create net new jobs, how that can increase that number. So that's really above my head and my pay grade. But Triumph will have economic experts to make those decisions. And I would encourage anybody who believes they have a project that will benefit those numbers to employ somebody or work with somebody who can help them demonstrate that. But all the applications and all that science will be vetted by Triumph as well.
I have a question. If after the cities turn their application in, who's going to review them? Who's
Who's
going to review the applications when the cities turns them in and see if they're...
Are you talking about when the...
Well, after the city turns their application in, who's going to review them besides the county, y'all, Triumph, or who?
Well, what will happen is a formal application will come to Triumph. And as part of that formal application, it will ask the question, is this project recommended by the Board of County Commissioners? And so that's a yes or no, and if it's yes, you attach a letter. It will then go to a project administration team that will score the project, and they're talking now about scoring it in ranges, like on an A, B, C, D, F scale instead of a numerical scale. And then based on after the project is scored, the economic advisor will look at the projects and say, here are the projects that make, scored high and have the biggest impact and have we think we can demonstrate measurable results quickly, those are the projects that will likely get funding first. There will have to be a whole other layer of evaluation because, candidly, if we don't have a project from Bay County that scores, let's say they all score D on an A through F scale, we still have to allocate 15% of the money to Bay County. So if every project from Bay County scores a D, then we'll have to get into the weeds and which one of those projects, do we think are the best for that county? Or they may wait. They may say, we don't think any of these are good. Go back to the drawing board and come back with something else.
Okay, after that said, who would issue the money out, the tribe or the county?
Try.
Tribe would give it to the cities?
It depends on who the applicant is.
Okay.
Who wins the grant.
Okay.
It could be the city, it could be the county, it could be a regional economic authority, development authority, anyone who qualifies as an awardee.
And they will give it to the different entities that apply, because if they don't do what they're supposed to do, and it comes back to clawback, they're not clawing back at the county. They're clawing back at whoever applied for that money and agreed to go by the contract between the Triumph Board and that entity, which is what we were talking about earlier. So
I know we was in the meeting.
county's not on the hook.
I know we was in the meeting with Marion County that none of us to get, they wanted 75%, they right off to do it, because they had all their stuff up to pay the money already up front to do it. Was in that meeting, and you?
Yeah, but that was consortium. This is Triumph. It's two different pots of money.
Yeah, they was still at the Triumph too, that day we was up there talking about it. They said they was out.
Yeah, but anyway. Any other comments from the commissioners?
I would add some, Chairman, if I may. I, like probably everybody else in the room, would really like to see some more clarification going into it to know what the requirements are for the metrics. Because you can't, none of us, I don't care who we are, can meet the criteria that we don't know what it is. So I do echo what some of the commissioners have said up here, especially when you start talking about any kind of callback measure. If you don't know the standard you're supposed to meet, it's really hard to do that. It's really, really complicated to do so. So I know that requires a lot, but again, we're talking about millions of dollars.
Yeah. And that's kind of what the pre-application process is about, so you don't get caught up in that. Letting them review a pre-app and then just try and board with us. Yeah, we'll fund that project, but we think it's a good project. Go ahead and submit a full application with the numbers and everything, just down to the nitty gritty, and you get down to the details of each individual project. Another thing that was spoken at the Triumph meeting was the more money, matching monies that you have, then you're probably going to be elevated up into through the selection process. In other words, as we said earlier, they want to make $300 million, $1.5 billion, or whatever the number may be. They want to increase that quite substantially. So, point being is, if you're submitting a project but you have no matching funds to bring with you, it's going to put you down on the criteria list as far as what they're looking for and how they're trying to take $300 million and turn it into all this other. Is that a correct statement?
I think that's a fair characterization of what the board has said. And I think the legislation says it shouldn't be used to fund 100% of any project. So I think human nature would tell you, and I think the board would say, if you come and say, look, Triumph, if you put $2 million in, we'll bring you $200 million of federal infrastructure funds to improve roads in the region. We'd be foolish not to fast track that, I would think.
Right.
I don't mean to speak to the board, but that type of leverage is very attractive, and it's a priority the legislature and the board has identified. That to the extent we can do that, it's important. And I know there are discussions going on right now that if President Trump is successful in getting an infrastructure bill passed, then the first people who will be in line for those federal monies are people who have matching dollars. And there are not many communities out there that can say they've got this type of matching money right now. So, we'll wait and see. Who knows? But this is a unique opportunity for our region to be in a position to perhaps get some very big grants from other entities because of our ability to come up with a quick match.
That's not fair. It's not fair at all, because the bigger counties down to the south of us got the money to do it. These little counties up here don't got that type of money to match that.
No, we're gonna use Triumph as our man.
They're gonna let you use that for a match.
That's what you just said.
I'm saying, that's an example.
Yeah, if they're federal dollars, we don't need to put ad valorem taxes. We would say, look, we have this great project, we want to repave roads in Franklin County that we're not on any sort of plan. So if the federal government's putting up money, then we would be able to move to the top because we say, well, we're going to come in with $2 million of Triumph money for Franklin County.
Okay.
So Triumph gives us some equal footing for the southern county you're talking about that have bigger tax base. So that's why Triumph is important for us.
And I spoke about that at the board meeting I attended over in Panama City. Jason was there. Is the smaller counties do not have the resources. Franklin County does not have the resources or millions of dollars in reserve as Escambia County will. And I'm wanting to make a point to the Triumph Board when I spoke over there is it's going to take us a little more time to get it together because I don't have the staff for it. I got 2 ladies answering the phone. I got a county planner and a building inspector. That's what I got, staff. I don't have lab technicians. I don't have public safety officers. I don't have all that. And so, you know, we talked about it one time, trying to get somebody to come in and help us do some planning and to help us generate some good projects. And then we got an email from yourself that DEO had monies for this. Well, they do if you create 100 jobs. They don't have monies when you're not looking at creating 100 jobs. In our particular situation, we're trying to sustain 1,500 to 2,000 jobs with our oyster industry. That's important for our economy here. It's not creating jobs. It's trying to sustain this industry, which is now at an all-time low. So we got to do some major planning, some major projects to try to figure out a way to bring this state back, so that 1,500 to 2,000 people in our community can continue to make a living as they have for 200 years. Not only that, but going through the BP oil spill, as you were referring to earlier, I was on that for this county from day one right on through. And everywhere from Escambia to Walton to Okaloosa to Santa Rosa, every one of these guys want oysters from Apalachicola Bay for their tourism, for the people that come and visit their counties. They don't want oysters from Louisiana and Texas. They want Apalachicola oysters. Now, this was expressed to me through all the different county commissions through all these different counties. Well, there's going to be some projects coming through from the county side to try to help rebuild this bay and retain those jobs. Do you see job retention as important as job creation? And how do you think the Triumph Board would look at that?
Well, I think it's an important point, an important question, and I think it's all in how you present it to the board. And you present it very passionately and very purposely just now. I think that's what you have to present to them. And I think we have to look at, everything differently in this day and age. And the sustainability of the oysters is something that's near and dear to the hearts of everyone in this community. And the state's spent tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars fighting with Alabama and Georgia for years to try to make sure we get our fair share of the fresh water coming down the rivers out of Lake Seminole and into the Apalachicola River. So I think that's something the state's committed to. I think the Triumph Board is committed to preserving the way of life that we enjoy as much as we can. However, and if there is a however, they're also looking at how do we diversify our economy, because they believe that the best way to make sure that we can continue living the way we want to live and have lived for 200 years is to have a diverse economy, so that we're not crippled if by some unfortunate calamity the oyster population goes away.
Yeah.
That there's something else out there.
And I understand that because the Triumph Fund was established for economic diversification, so that you don't lose your whole economy should you have another oil spill. So I'm very much aware of that too. But I'm just saying, these smaller counties, they're not going to bring in boating, and they're not going to do all this stuff. But they still have needs, and they still have sustainability issues that we're looking at. And we're a little bit different than these bigger counties, which is exactly the presentation that I made to the Triumph Board, that I wanted to be careful and be considerate and understand Wakulla, Gulf, and Franklin, as we're not Escambia and Okaloosa and Walton. We live here on a $10 million budget annually. That's it. Those guys over there got $200 million in reserve, okay? We don't. So we're different. But it doesn't mean we don't have needs, and it doesn't mean that we don't have issues here. And I explained all this to the Triumph Board, and I'm gonna hush in a minute, but anyway, and I know you don't have a vote in that, but I'm just trying to explain to you where we're at as a small community, a rural community. You know, we're 72 miles long, but we're only 10 miles deep. Everything along the coast here is what we got. 90% of this county is owned by the state and federal government, so there'll be no explosive growth. It's just not going to happen because everybody in this area wants to maintain an environmentally sensitive area. You look around, there's no 10-story condominiums, no theme parks, no shopping malls, and the people that live here don't want that. It's all about maintaining the environment for these oysters and our seafood, and we now have a pretty good little tourism thing going, which is diversification, but they come here because of that. If we sit here and let these oysters die, the whole bay is going to die. There'll be no trout, redfish, flounders, or nothing else because the oysters are our water quality feature here that maintains the environment that we have. And if we lose those oysters, we're going to lose it all. And there's nothing here to fall back on it because the people didn't want it. You know, the stormwater runoff that comes with development destroys the environment. The people in this community don't want that. And the people that come here to visit say, man, you guys don't need to change nothing. We got one change in traffic light in 72 miles here, and I'm sure you came through it. That's it. You know, this is truly the forgotten coast, but it's truly a gem also. So we're all trying to work together to preserve that. I think Jason understands the importance of that, and you'll hear me speak more at more Triumph meetings as we move forward with some of these projects. But I want to give if there's anyone in the public that might, Mr. Lockley has one thing he'd like to say, and then we'll take some public comment real quick.
I guess my question is, whether it be county, whether it be city, school board, or individual, you say you're looking for a match. Okay, some project might be 2 million, some might be $1 million, some might be 100,000, 50. Is y'all gonna put a scale out there so people know what to come up with? To try to help yourself, whether it be the county, the city, the individual, anybody.
Yep, Commissioner, I don't know that they're going to be able to publish a scale that says this is the match that is required. I can say that I believe the statute says, and I can cite to the language, that they have the right to request 100% public sector match if the public sector is really engaged in the project. But I think it's going to depend on the scale, and I think it's just going to depend on a project-by-project analysis. But I think that, again, I want to sit down and I want to thank, on behalf of the board, thank you all for letting me speak. You know your county best, and the good news in this is that there is a large amount of money, $15 million, larger than your annual budget, that is going to be spent here, and it's going to be spent largely on your recommendations.
Well, a lot of it gonna be spent if they got to put up a big match, but they don't have it.
On that one match, let me say, so is in-kind going to be considered the equivalent of cash when it comes to this?
In-kind can be considered for match purposes, yes.
Have the same value as cash, because we all know what cash is.
I think it's a project-by-project analysis.
We're putting him on the spot. He's not a board member, so we understand that. We appreciate you coming here today and giving us some insight. You are the legal counsel for the Triumph Board. You know, we put you on the spot and ask you a lot of things that the board's going to answer. We understand that. And I hope everybody here understands that. But I wanted to ask if there's 1 or 2 questions from the public that you might want to ask. Please come forward, state your name for the record.
My name is Bonnie Davis, a resident of Franklin County, and my question is, have you all given any consideration to making advice and help resources available at the Triumph Fund level to help these small counties develop applications that meet your criteria, that have acceptable metrics they can live with and you can live with, instead of forcing smaller counties to spend a substantial sum of money hiring people to help them develop applications that will meet your standards? I would think that would be a really good way to ensure that the $15 million gets spent prudently, is for you all to help us get to where we want to go in a way that's prudent and acceptable to you. So that's just my question, is the Triumph Board considering something like that?
thank you for your question. I apologize. Turn my back on that.
Go ahead and answer.
There has been discussion at the board level about the best way to do that. And we talked, I think Commissioner Parrish mentioned the email I sent about applying to DEO for money. There was discussion at the Triumph Board about whether or not if DEO turns it down, you can apply for Triumph for money for that purpose. And that question's an open question right now. I think it's something the board would be very amenable to. I think right now what the board's doing is they're taking the assets that they have, which are primarily the members of the board and me, and putting us on the road to answer questions as best we can. I get phone calls every day from people, government sector people, private sector people, asking questions about applications. And we're doing the best we can now. But I think if someone were to put in an application or pre-app asking for that kind of assistance, the board would then take that up and make a decision on whether they can do it or not. And whether they feel like the legislation authorizes them to do that.
Come forward, state your name for the record, please.
I'm Bill McCarty from Franklin County. My question is, will the county accept any additional pre-applications between the deadline, for now and the deadline on the 15th?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that, Bill. I know right now we have $21 million applied for. We're not getting but 15. As Mr. Remington spoke earlier, this process will go on for the next year. When you submit these pre-applications that we have, and if a bunch of those applications are turned down, then yes, I would assume that we would be taking pre-applications for other stuff. Having said that, you need to know when you're doing these pre-applications exactly what the criteria is, and that what you're submitting for meets the criteria. It would save them a lot of time. It would save any entity that's applying a lot of time, because if it doesn't meet the criteria, 99% of the time you're not going to get funded. I mean, that's just the way I see it, and that's probably the way it's going to be. But yeah, there will be more time to submit more applications. My fear at Triumph is like one guy that wants to do the pump out. He wants $80 million. Well, there ain't but $300 million, and you have to keep in mind there are probably 400 different entities applying to Triumph Board for money. Now, which entities get funded and don't get funded, I don't have a clue. But this is not just a few people applying. The last Triumph Board I went to, there was 200 people in there. And some of them were wanting that money today when I made my little speech over there. I said, hold on then. These people are here wanting money, and I'm not even prepared to submit an application yet. Which is why I made the speech about the small rural counties and the resources that we have in order to get these projects together. Now, when I say small rural county, I'm not only talking about the county. The city's in the same boat I'm in as far as resources and how they put all this stuff together. School board's in the same boat I'm in. So we're all in this together. We all have very limited resources compared to some of these bigger counties. So to answer your question, I really can't answer, but I can answer. I can tell you right now we're over budget, but we're not the ones choosing the project. The Triumph Board is.
In my opinion, that's not the issue, because it is a competitive process. In Alan's memo to the board this morning, he basically said that Triumph was going to relax the standards a little bit. And also, your next meeting won't be until the 21st of November, so it's going to be difficult to evaluate and rank a priority ranking, should you choose to do so, to the Triumph Board. My question is simply this: will the county accept any additional pre-applications between now and the 15th?
Absolutely. But you need to keep in mind that these pre-applications have to meet the criteria.
Yes, I understand.
And the more matching monies you're bringing to the table, the more chances you are of getting funded. So it's not just applications, it's about good applications, as the attorney spoke a while ago, and making sure they meet the criteria of the Triumph Board, and he gave you a synopsis of that, briefly. And all this information is available on triumphgovcoast.com. So you can go on that website and get all the information that's compiled.
But the county had put a, let's say, a timetable that you all had created noon yesterday for pre-applications. My question is simply this: will you accept any additional pre-applications from eligible applicants that meet all the criteria between now and the 15th?
The county referred to the website. That's what the website said. We have since learned that there's no rush. Well, let me tell you something, Bill. Everybody in this 8 county district is not gonna wait till the last minute. They're not gonna take time, which is why I said there's so many entities applying. You can take your time and you can wait and we can take pre-app. But if you get there and there's only this much money and you got 200 applicants fighting over this much money that's left, I'm not saying that's gonna happen. I'm saying it could happen. When you got entities that are applying for $80 million at a pop, the $300 million is not gonna go far. I'm not saying he's gonna get funded, but he's not the only one. There's other entities out there want more money than that. So, I would like to see.
Your answer, Bill.
I got my answer, and thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Quick comment on that, just in case there's any misunderstanding. Anybody that thinks they have an eligible award can apply to Triumph directly. Pre-apps don't have to flow through the county. The county provides its recommendations, but
if one of the criteria is a recommendation to the county, it makes sense to do that.
But remember, this is pre-app.
I understand.
And when you file that application is when the question will be asked, does the county recommend this?
So the Triumph Board then will go back to the county and ask them for a subsequent recommendation on the projects that you've received. So some that may not go through the county to submitted could actually be recommended by the county later.
Absolutely.
Or prioritized.
Absolutely.
Ms. Brennan, you have a question? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
Thank you. I'm Brenda LaPaz, Mayor, City of Carabel. I have 3 questions, but hopefully the answers will be cut and dry. On your question and answer section in your on the website, it says that the Triumph is prohibited from dispersing 100% of any award in a single year. But then you want the projects to be shovel ready. That can be completed quickly, and many of the projects are shovel ready to be completed within 6 to 8 months. But then
Mayor LaFosse, she's talking about the $300 million.
the $300 million.
Not an individual applicant problem. Your $1 million project, you'll get all your $1 million
At one fell swoop.
I say that. Because otherwise, it'll be a problem for small projects to move forward.
Which section of the statute?
No, this is on your question and answer section in your on your website.
Can you give me a minute to find that line?
That's fine, and I'll move on because I have 3 questions and you can answer it later in the meeting if you wish. Say the board of directors decide that they see no projects that they want to fund. They are not mandated by the legislature to allocate all of the funding that has been allocated to them. They can roll that over from year to year. They don't have to allocate that funding in one fiscal year.
That is correct.
Okay. And then I just want to follow up a little bit on Commissioner Lockley's comment regarding the household income. On one of the minutes that I read, the board of directors were discussing about the income. The legislature was requiring it to be above the national average. Is there any indication that the Triumph Board of Directors may seek reconsideration on that particular provision from the legislature? Because in these rural counties, it's going to be very difficult to have projects that produce jobs that are above the national average in pay.
There's been a lot of discussion about that by the Triumph Board, and so I know we're looking at that very closely. And I would direct you to the discretionary priorities. So those are priorities in the legislature that we find projects that meet that. That doesn't mean the project has to meet that priority. And I think the Triumph Board is working hard to find ways to be drilled down into exactly what is going on in the ground, particularly in the more rural counties.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think real quick, I'll make a comment on that. I think when they're looking at above the national average, they're talking about bringing businesses in that are going to create jobs. And if Triumph's going to spend dollars to help make that happen, then they want a commitment from these employers that these are going to be really good wages. I think that's where all that ties together. As you move forward and talking about the wages, I know wages in this county and every other county, there's a mean wage, and all that statistical data is easily available. And there's statistical data for the national mean average and all that. I think what they're trying to do is try to leverage, bringing these companies in, maybe not here, maybe in Escambia or somewhere, that are bringing these big companies in, but they want a commitment that they're gonna be really good, high-paying salaries if they're gonna commit Triumph dollars to help attract those types of people. I think that's where the tie-in is on that. I would hope that there'll be some discretion for our rural counties, that we're not going to meet that. You know, I would love to bring money into this economy, but realistically, are we going to be able to make that happen? Who knows? I mean, we work towards it and we try, but yeah, I just don't know if we'll be able to meet that either. I just don't know. Any other public comments that would like to ask the attorney a question before we move forward?
You want to answer that first part, your phone, which is referred to?
Yeah, what the statute says, I'll read a quote here, which you read correctly. Awards may not be used to finance 100% of any project or program. Triumph may require a 1-to-1 private sector match or higher. That's 100% private sector match. An awardee may not receive all of the funds available in a given year. That's what it says. I think it's open to interpretation whether that's all of the funds available to Triumph or all of the funds available to that awardee. But, you know, I would view more closely towards all the funds available at Triumph. But the goal being that Triumph does not want to run out of money, number one, and number two, that they do hope that some of these projects are long-term funding projects so that other monies come in first and then Triumph money comes in last. So
it can be done in stages, and in any big project or job generating project is going to be a multi-year implementation to begin with. I think that's where that comes in. Michael, you got something?
No, I just have to get up.
Me too. Let's take a 5-minute recess. Board of County Commissioners is now back in session. I'll turn it over to Alan Pierce.
All right, Commissioner, this is really a discussion for you all to have. I guess I'm going to ask some sort of questions. So one, you know, I appreciate Mr. Remington's presentation. It was a great presentation. We learned an awful lot of information. So much so that it's certainly possible that some of the applications, some of the pre-apps, the applicants may want to revisit their thing, since we just said that you can resubmit it, because there was a lot of information given about things that Triumph is emphasizing that we did not emphasize to you all, because we didn't necessarily know that. So I say that I question now whether we want to go through the 12 pre-apps we have, or whether we want to let people, you know, review them who submitted them. I can sort of talk about the two. The county is most familiar with the armory and the fish hatchery, oyster hatchery. But some of the other applications may want to be revised, either in the amount, type of cash match, the metrics they're looking for. I mean, there's a lot of things that may be added. So I just say that. It might save everybody some time. Why hear one version when, in fact, it's going to be revised?
Well, listening to Scott earlier, which I was not aware of, when we looked at this information on the website, you had to November 15th to turn these apps in. They had to come to the county first. Listen to Mr. Remington, which is counsel for the Triumph Board. He says they don't have to come to the county first. They can be turned in straight to Triumph. Triumph will review the pre-application and then return those to the county for a recommendation or not. Is that correct, Mr. That was exactly your statement, right?
Close. I think close. I don't want to mislead. I think the pre-apps will come back to the people that submitted them. Ultimately, the application will be what asks for whether or not it's recommended by the county commission.
Okay. So
that's where the rubber meets the road in the actual application. I'm not saying an early recommendation might not help the application, but where it will be required is in the actual application stage, which is likely won't happen until the first of next year.
So you remain at the podium. So our question as a county is, should we review all these pre-applications? Should we prioritize these pre-applications? Or should we?
I say we let the pre-applicants go straight to the Triumph Board and let them make that initial cut. That's what I'm reading right now.
That's a perfectly good way to do it. I think there's some applications that maybe come directly from the county.
That's correct.
Right, and we need to look at those. But the other one, I don't want to judge the city's applications on a pre-app basis, because there may be more information they want to develop now, and rather than us get in the middle, they all send it right to Triumph.
And to Alan, do we have all the information we need to be reviewing these pre-apps? Because we're learning today just like the public is. I mean, we're all learning together, and I know Triumph's still trying to set their stuff up, so we're all learning together. includes the Triumph Board, so we're all learning.
And I think, remember, I think what a lot of the county commissions are doing is they're taking these pre-apps that are coming in, and they're looking at pre-apps that other government entities are providing them. Maybe it's the same pre-app they're going to submit to Triumph, and they're saying, you know what, this is a great project. How do we get behind this? How do we help you with this project? So you may see a project that starts with the school board, and the county may come on as co-applicant down the road before the actual application is turned in. So again, it's an opportunity to match make, to get everybody on the same page, and to give you a preview of what's out there.
I don't know, we're trying to figure out how to proceed with today's meeting. And we're missing a commissioner, and normally we don't take a vote on anything or anything like that without having a full board if it's a big issue, and this is a big issue for the whole community.
Right. And what I would say to you, no pre-app is going to live or die based on any votes you take today. I mean, there's got to be a lot more vetting of every pre-app that's filed. So you can certainly, if you see a project that you really think is important and you think is transformative to your region, you know, you can recommend it if you like, officially or unofficially. But there's no requirement, and I don't think you're going to be prejudiced if you don't recommend something.
That's your interpretation, but we don't know about everybody else's interpretation. Whether they'll think the board is biased or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
I certainly try to understand what you're saying, because on the pre-app, there's not enough information there. Right. So how are we going to make a recommendation on something that's just scantily?
Well, that's what we were talking about. Is send the applications on the Triumph and let them go through the pre-app application looking at it. Then if they ask for a full-blown application, I would say at that point that it probably should come back to the county with a support or not support when they submit the application or after they submit it. Before they submit that final application, you would say come back to the board?
On the application is a question that says, is this proposal recommended by the county commission? And they have to check yes or no. And if they check yes, they need to submit a letter from the county commission, it says the county commission recommends this project Triumph Gulf Coast. Okay. Doesn't have to say this is number one on our list. It just says we recommend it, yes or no. At the same time, Triumph will take anything you want to send them. If you want to send them a list down the road and say, hey, we know you got 6 applications from Franklin County in front of you. We think these 2 are the most important. We think this one is the most important. And we think they're all equally important. I think the board would love to have your opinion because you're the closest to it.
But it doesn't determine whether they're going to be funded or not.
Correct.
I sort of think that there's, again, 2 things I'm thinking. One is that some of the applicants may want to change things, and that we ought to give them an opportunity to do that. And 2, that we could certainly, we could certainly talk about the county projects, but all the pre-applicants go to Triumph, let them sort them out, let them respond directly to the applicants. I mean, it puts a lot of work on you all, but you get paid for it.
Well, they're going to Triumph anyway, whether we recommend them or not. They're still going to look at every applicant. So we're not putting no more work on the Triumph board. They're going to see them anyway.
Anyway, that's
whether we recommend or whether we don't. We're still going to Triumph.
The pre-app's going there.
It's going there anyway.
Well, most of them here, one judge.
Well, we can ask them whether they want. Oh, here comes the mayor. Let's see what the mayor says.
You know, just sit back there listening. I agree. We felt like we was rushed to put this together, to get something to you today. And I'm sure that something's left out, something that we want to add. So I would like to get another look at it myself before we give you the final version. So just from the city back for that proposal perspective, I'd be happy to take mine back and resubmit it within the next day or so.
Well, what we're looking at, man, is just submitting them straight to Triumph.
Well, we can do that as well.
And then if Triumph deems that the project is appropriate and meets the criteria and they're willing to, if they're even thinking about funding, they're going to ask you to submit a full-blown application.
Right. Well, and what I'm saying is, what we have already submitted, I'd rather take another look at it before you submit that, the city submitted directly to the Triumph.
I think we want you to submit the project.
And that works too.
I think that's what we're looking at. And then if Triumph says, yeah, this is a good project, we need more information, you need to do a full application. At that time, that full application needs to come back here, and we'll check the box whether we recommend it or not.
All right.
It still goes to Triumph.
Well, I think that works best, especially for the city, because I had people working overseas for the weekend to put this together to get you guys.
And I'd like to apologize, but that's just what we were led to believe. We were not trying to be misleading to
And
anybody.
I know we talking things, but you told me you wanted us to have something here today.
Yes.
That's correct. But I did not do it maliciously. That's the way I thought that's the way the process was supposed to go.
And I certainly appreciate that, but we'll take ours back and resubmit it directly to the Trump.
And I think that's what everybody needs to do. You got a question, Mr. Brandon?
I would just concur with Mr. Johnson,
You
Mayor
feel the
Johnson.
same way, Superintendent?
Yes, I do. With a staff of only 12 people at the district office, this has put a really strain on our school and the charter schools. So I'd like to, now that we have all this information, be able to go back and really get a good pre-application.
You got 12 staff members?
I have
Good
12.
Lord have mercy. You got twice as many as I got. Okay, so, Alan, how you want to proceed with it?
Yeah, I would say that we appreciate y'all coming and hearing what you've got to learn. I would say that we do have one applicant that came out of town, that's FSU, whether you want to hear what, because we had one of the research directors here. You just want to hear what.
Well, I think you've articulated our case pretty well about the importance of the Bay in terms of the.
Absolutely, and I will state that I want these two county projects to move forward. One of them is a oyster hatchery for Apalachicola Bay, which benefits this whole entire region and other regions. And one project that the county has is for finishing up the armory down here that different people use for weddings, and people across the county use that also. So those are two projects that are county-wide, which is what the county commission should be doing. The cities look out for each geographical location in the cities. The county is responsible for taking care of the counties. I would like a vote of the board to move the two county projects forward to the Triumph Board for pre-application. We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Massey, second by Commissioner Lockley, to move those two projects forward. Those are the only projects that we have submitted, Alan, which are county-wide projects. And I think they're good for the county, and we will move those forward to the Triumph Board.
So we'll submit our pre-application, just like you all will submit your pre-application, essentially.
That's all we're doing, is submitting the pre-application also.
All right, that being said, I don't really think of the business.
We haven't voted on those. We haven't voted on those in a second. You have a comment?
No, it's got to vote.
Yeah, I know, we just didn't have to vote. Any other comments from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We will move those two pre-apps to the Triumph Board.
All right, this PowerPoint, for those who want it, contact Michael Morone. He has it available for anybody who wants it. So it's a summary of what the statute says. I appreciate Scott and Mr. Choate being here. And we'll see some of you all tomorrow in the Triumph meeting.
One more question.
Let's finish this motion up here. Or did we finish that motion?
You guys.
Okay.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
Is there gonna be another meeting like this any time in the future?
Just something for y'all to discuss, and I think we may get some feedback from Triumph Board. At this point, I would say no. At this point, pre-app is going to go straight to Triumph Board. They're going to vet and decide whether they meet any of the basic criteria, and if they don't, that's the end of the project. If they do, they'll tell the applicants to come to the county and see if we recommend it. So I don't know we'll have a pre-app.
Well, we will see each application because they have to come back to the board for either a recommendation or to send it back to the Triumph Board.
Right. Now, whether that's commission, whether that's once a month or once every 3 months, I don't have any idea what the schedule depends on the process of Triumph Board has to go through themselves. Mr. Choate, you had a question?
They won't come back automatically to you as the board, but as our attorney said, one of the questions on the final application is, do you have the approval of Franklin County Commission? And so if they haven't brought it to you, they can't check that, and if they do, they're not going to have a letter from you. So it's going to force them to bring it to you, but there is no mechanism in place where we return them to you.
Okay, so they won't get a letter of support if they don't bring it back.
That's right, and now that's as of now.
Okay.
And that gives them time to redo the pre-app, so they'll get a better chance.
Does all the entities understand what was just stated? I'm looking at the different entities here, and I'm not understanding. Yes, hang on a second. One question real quick, if I could get your attention again. I want to make sure all the entities that are applying, that once you submit a pre-app and Triumph Board notifies you to submit a full application, if you do not bring that back to the county for us to give you a letter that we support your project, then your application will go back to the board without a letter of support. And that's totally up to you. I do think a letter of support from the county will elevate you a little bit, as it's previously been spoken, but that is an option that you don't have to bring it back to the county, you just will not get a letter of support for that. Ma'am, you want to come forward and state your name for the record?
My name is Pam Richardson. I live in Apalachicola, and I'm afraid I'm being a little dense. I don't quite understand this. So I fill out my pre-app. I want your approval. So I bring it to you first, and then I send it to Triumph?
No, ma'am, you send it straight to Triumph.
Well, that's what I thought I heard. But these gentlemen seem to say that if you don't check that, yes, the county approves of this.
That's not on the pre-app, that's on the true application. Once they think you have merit, they'll tell you to fill out a full application.
When you do
It's only on the application.
Yes, when you do the final full application, then you bring it to the board and we look at it, review your project, give you a letter of support or tell you that we don't support it, but you still return your application.
Okay.
Just a letter of support from the county will help you. It's like gaining points in a grant cycle.
Can I just ask one clarifying question? So if a pre-application is submitted directly to Triumph,
That's correct.
and it hasn't gone to the county, then will it be deemed to have less merit by the Triumph board?
No, he's
At
saying
that stage?
the question isn't asked until they approve your pre-app.
Okay, so they're just going to look at the intrinsic merits of the project and then look for county support at the application?
If they agree that your application has merit and meets the criteria, then they will ask you to do a full-blown application. When you do that full-blown application, you bring it back to the county, and we check the box and give you a letter saying, yes, we support this project.
But one of the criteria for the pre-application is not going to be whether the county supports the project.
That's correct.
No, you have the pre-application in front of you at this time.
Thank you.
And you know, we thought you did have to have this from the county to submit the pre-app. We're all learning. This is not being evasive, or we're all learning. And we've learned today from the attorney, which we've never spoke to before, and the public's learning from what the attorney's advice is giving us. So we're all in this together, and we're all learning the process together.
Okay.
And that's going to be it for the Triumph part of this thing. We got one other thing to take care of as a board, but that will be all for the Triumph. Yes, sir. We do appreciate you and Jason coming over today, and all the people that attended. We do appreciate you coming in today.